Donald Trump has won the election. In this video, we will see how he won, what could be the main lines of action in his second term, and also what are the greatest fears of his political adversaries. Let's get started. Donald Trump has done it again. Against all odds, he's won the election. Trump will return to the White House on 20th of January 2025.
This is a magnificent victory for the American people that will allow us to make America great again. America has given us an unprecedented and powerful mandate. We have taken back control of the Senate. Wow, that's good. It also looks like we'll be keeping control of the House of Representatives.
And I think that we just witnessed the greatest political comeback in the history of the United States of America.
Over and done with is a campaign in which we've seen Trump about to be assassinated, staging a farce in a McDonald's, or holding a press conference in a garbage truck. Regardless of whether you like the character or not, there is no doubt about one thing. He's managed to regain the support of the United States, and he's once again made history. He's made Grover Cleveland no longer the only president to lose an election, and after 4 years, return to win the White House. And this time, Trump has not only won, this time he has crushed all the odds. The former president has won every single state in contention. It has been a thrashing. One of the biggest factors in this unexpected result, the Latino vote. Yes, that sleeping giant that brings together more than 15% of those eligible to vote has awakened. This time, Hispanics have moved, have voted, and have embraced Trumpism much more intensely, and that has been decisive. For example, in Starr County, the most Hispanic county in the entire country, Trump won by 16 points. And don't think this is a common occurrence. Republicans haven't won here for more than 130 years. But this is a phenomenon that has occurred at the national level. Mike Gonzalez of the Heritage Foundation warned us about it a few days ago.
Es que el republicano no tiene que ganar el 70% del voto hispano, tiene que ganar el 100%. Lo que tienes que hacer mejor que lo que había hecho antes. Y ese nivel está 27%, 27%, que es lo que ganó Romney. Si Trump gana, lo que se espera que será tal vez un 42%, un 43%, un 44%.
And that's exactly what has happened. Trump has vastly improved his voting intentions among minorities, particularly Latino men. Look at what the exit polls are telling us. Trump has improved his voting intention among Latino men by 17 points. It's a wild, astronomical shift. We're talking about millions of votes that have turned the election around. The African-American male vote also wavered for Harris, but with Hispanics, it's gone completely out of whack. That's what cost the Democrats the election and created the Republican wave we've seen. A wave that will also cause the Republicans to take control of both the Senate and probably the House of Representatives. On top of which, we have to add the majority they already have in the Supreme Court. In other words, the new administration will have enormous and widespread power, plain and simple. And this has a lot to do with the great political shift among Latino voters. What's more, this time, Donald Trump doesn't come alone. Let me explain. In 2016, when Trump won completely unexpectedly, he came to Washington basically with a team of old, lifelong Republicans. But this time, that won't be the case. Today, Donald Trump arrives with an entourage of people completely loyal to his movement. Make America Great Again. We're talking about profiles such as Thomas Homan, former director of the US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, who today seems to be tagged as pilot of the new administration's immigration policy. And as I said, this time, Trump's team seems to come with very clear ideas.
Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
This is just one example. But as we've said, this time Trump arrives accompanied with a team of loyal Trumpistas, and that's quite a departure from 2016. Obviously, these are not the only travel companions that the president-elect will have. At his side, we will also have profiles such as Elon Musk, of course.
We have a new star. A star is born, Elon. But he's a character, he's a special guy, he's a super genius. We have to protect our geniuses. We don't have that many of them.
Trump said on the campaign trail that if the billionaire accepts, he would put him in charge of a new government efficiency commission. Basically, the idea would be to entrust Musk with the task of reducing bureaucracy, regulations, and perhaps also government spending. Of course, it remains to be seen how that turns out, because if we know anything, it's that Donald Trump loves to spend hand over fist. In any case, this is the part libertarians like best, and it's completely completely understandable. Elon Musk has promised that this administration will come to cut the administration itself. We'll see how far he goes, but what we do know is that it's possible the mythical libertarian Ron Paul will be advising him. Let's see. But that's not all. Along with the most loyal Trumpists and the Silicon Valley circle of the Elon Musks, the Peter Thiels and Vice President J.D. Vance, there will also be other oddball profiles such as Robert Kennedy Jr., a strange guy who probably does strange things and whom we would never have imagined to be in the political front row.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And he's going to help make America healthy again. And now he's a great guy, and he really means it. He wants to do some things, and we're going to let him go to it. I just said, but Bobby, leave the oil to me. We have more liquid gold, oil and gas. We have more liquid gold than any country in the world, more than Saudi Arabia. We have more than Russia. Bobby, stay away from the liquid gold. Other than that, go have a good time, Bobby.
Be that as it may, the point is that what there won't be a lot of will be lifelong Republicans. On the contrary, this time Donald Trump has the party completely at his feet. He doesn't have to add them to his team. Rather, it's he who is placing Trumpists at the head of the party. The difference is enormous. This time the president won't have to deal with profiles such as Mitt Romney, Jeff Flake, John McCain, or Liz Cheney in his own ranks. No, nothing remotely close. This time Trump will arrive in Washington, as I've said, like an emperor with immense power. Now, the question is, what are his plans in this new phase? What can we expect from the second season of Make America Great Again? Well, we're about to tell you all about it.
The plan.
From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
This phrase, which was Donald Trump's banner during his first term, is back stronger than ever. With his return to the White House, Trump has promised to take it to the next level. But what exactly does this America first in 2024 really mean? Well, VisualPolitik community, everything indicates a Copernican change, starting with foreign policy. Watch during his first presidency, Trump turned the diplomatic order that had sustained the United States for decades upside down. His approach now could be even more forceful, starting with Europe. Trump has once and 1,000 times made his opinion of NATO clear. The era of the unlimited US military umbrella is over. Now, the Europeans will have to get their act together. Washington's protection will no longer be unlimited, and the search for consensus is also over. The United States will play its card as it sees fit, period. So, obviously, another one who is now celebrating is Vladimir Putin. With Trump, the Russian president now has a clear path to get the war in Ukraine ended without having to make concessions and perhaps gradually restore normalcy as far as sanctions against the Russian economy are concerned. That at least seems to be the Kremlin's hope. Evidently, it's still too early to know what on earth will happen. But if there's one thing that both the president-elect and his vice president have insistently repeated, it's that one of their priorities in international politics will be to put an end to the war in Ukraine. To achieve this, they have a plan.
Vance says Trump's plan to end war in Ukraine could include creating demilitarized zone. In a podcast interview, J.D. Vance also said a peace settlement could involve barring Ukraine from joining the NATO alliance.
Obviously, the details of this plan, if it really does exist, are not known. In any case, what we do know is that, as well as vetoing Ukraine's entry into NATO, it's quite possible that the new administration will push for Russia to keep Crimea and the areas currently occupied by Russia. In other words, they would seek a 1953 Korean Peninsula type solution, an armistice, freezing the war and allowing Russia to keep much of the occupied territories in exchange for ending the conflict. Of course, in this case, Ukraine's ties with NATO and probably with the United States would also be limited. Put another way, we are talking about creating a kind of South Korea, but about burying the conflict. This, of course, would be a victory for Putin's Russia, but what can we say? Trump has been advocating this position for a very long time. In fact, he repeated it not too many days ago.
Trump blames Zelensky for starting war with Russia.
Of course, a plan along these lines would be a sledgehammer for Kyiv. Now, Putin is not the only one who is surely celebrating Trump's re-election. Another who's probably popping the champagne cork is Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. Because, let's see, Kamala Harris was also a signature supporter of Israel, but let's just say she was more critical of the unrestrained war in Gaza and Lebanon. However, with Trump, it all looks like it's going to be totally different. The president-elect is likely to give Israel carte blanche. Not only that, but the Trump administration, which has close ties with Saudi Arabia, is likely to seek to bring them on board in exchange for a green light for massive arms sales, a promise to stop Iran at any cost, and the like. And let's see, from a strategic point of view, the idea of promoting a cooperation group between the United Arab Emirates, Israel, and Saudi Arabia could be very beneficial for the United States. It would mean Washington could put an end once and for all to the nightmare that the Middle East represents every now and then. In a way, the United States would no longer have to be playing sheriff, or at least it wouldn't have to be doing it the whole time. Well, in this way, with the changes in Europe, in Ukraine, and in the Middle East, United States international policy could focus on Donald Trump's true international obsession. Can you guess? I'm of course talking about competition with China. We'll have plenty of time to talk about it, but you know it was Trump who launched the trade war with Beijing. Although we'll have to see, because this time he comes with Elon Musk by his side. And what about Elon Musk? Well, what he wants is to sell Teslas in China. But VisualPolitik community, Donald Trump's America First is not just a foreign policy slogan, it is above all a vision for transforming the country's identity at home. This is something we've already talked about at length here on VisualPolitik and also on Visual Economic. Trump wants to change the US model, out of conviction and probably also for a clear electoral interest. Now, let me explain what I mean. The fact is that during the campaign, he even said things that obviously will not be fulfilled, but that give us a very clear idea of where his new administration may go.
Trump floats ending the federal income tax. Trump proposes ending double taxation on Americans abroad, latest tax promise ahead of election.
Let's see, Trump has promised to lower taxes, particularly on businesses, and that's virtually certain to happen. He won't eliminate the personal income tax, but he will extend the tax cuts that are due to expire in 2025, and he will also look to Congress to approve some new tax breaks. We can take that for granted. The problem is that the US government deficit is out of control, and that's where tariffs come in. The idea the Trump team seems to have is to raise international tariffs to get people to consume more products made in America. This, under their approach, would raise production and wages. It would, in a way, be something like import substitution from Latin America. At the same time, those tariffs would generate revenue for the federal government. They expect them to generate enough to be able to cut taxes without exploding the deficit. But if Trump comes into office this time with one obsession above all others, it has to do with immigration. The president has promised to carry out mass deportations, limit work visas, and close the door to illegal immigration at all costs. And VisualPolitik community, the important thing is that if Trump advocates this approach, it isn't by chance. It's likely that this has been one of the key factors to his victory. Let me explain. The US economy has done very well in recent years, but it has done particularly well for a particular part of the population, the most skilled workers. Hispanics, African Americans, and non-college educated whites have fared well, yes, but much less well. They've been hit the hardest by inflation, rising housing prices, and higher interest rates. Probably the feeling that many of them have is that they're missing out on this wave of prosperity, and that, of course, generates frustration. What's more, it's also these same social groups who have to deal with the most direct effects of immigration. Logically, illegal immigrants compete for unskilled jobs, live in neighborhoods that are not exactly wealthy, and on top of that, they usually seek to relate to similar cultural and social environments. In that way, these groups are the ones who feel immigration the most. And here, Trumpism has very cleverly seen it very clearly. All of these groups support tariffs and a very tough immigration policy. They're also more socially conservative, so in the end, they were a perfect fit for his candidacy. And of course, Joe Biden's weak image throughout the term hasn't helped. The successes of his administration have not rubbed off on the social majority. In any case, this poses a major problem for the Democratic Party going forward. Why is that? Well, you see, over the last few decades, this party was essentially the party of minorities. It lost with whites, but it crushed it with Hispanics and African Americans. Now, the tables have turned. The Latino vote is already contested, and this represents a nuclear change in American politics. Because the question is, what will be the new Democratic voting grounds? It's not clear.
They came from all quarters, union, non-union, African American, American, Hispanic American, Asian American, Arab American, Muslim American. We had everybody, and it was beautiful. It was a historic realignment.
Meanwhile, at the same time, this makes Trumpism end up consolidating itself as the new identity of the Republican Party for a long time to come. Incidentally, one of the big wins of the night has to do with the Supreme Court. Trump's victory and Republican control of the Senate will give them the opportunity to replace any departures. And there happen to be two conservative justices, Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, who could be on the verge of retirement. So what does this mean? Well, now the Republicans will be able to replace them with two other very conservative profiles. And since the position is for life, this could make the Supreme Court conservative for a long time. And keep one thing in mind, in the United States, the Supreme Court carries a lot of weight. But all in all, what scares his adversaries the most is what we could describe as Trump's possible revenge. Check it out.
Trump's revenge.
VisualPolitik community, Trump's political agenda is controversial. But regardless of what you think of it, it's not what terrifies his opponents the most. The main concern these days has to do with his character and his way of relating to institutions. This time, Trump comes with a thirst for revenge. Revenge against those he considers traitors. Revenge against those who supposedly stole the 2020 elections from him. Revenge, ultimately, against anyone who has dared to stand up to him. In recent months, Trump has made threats left and right. For example, he has threatened the Biden family with the appointment of a special prosecutor to investigate and attempt to prosecute them.
Trump threatens to prosecute Biden if he's re-elected unless he gets immunity.
But he's also threatened many of the senior officials who were part of his first administration. That's the case, for instance, with Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff under the first Trump presidency. And the fact is, Milley had many run-ins with Trump. For example, he opposed deploying military troops at the time of the Black Lives Matter protests. He prevented Trump from going ahead with his crazy idea of sending the military to swing states to confiscate voting machines. And he was the one who had the cabinet overrule the president after his election defeat. Trump has not forgotten him, and that's why he's been threatening him for months with all kinds of punishments, military trials, tax department investigations, or a return to service in order to demote him. And this is but just one example. There are many more names on Trump's list. Many of them, if not most of them, are people linked to the Republican Party. Likewise, there are also fears that the new administration will carry out a real purge of federal institutions. How would it do this? Well, by reinstituting an October 2020 executive order that was subsequently revoked by Biden in 2021. I'm talking about Schedule F, a new labor category approved by Trump that would eliminate many of the labor protections that some public employees have. That way, the government of the day could quickly and easily fire many federal agency employees over a political issue. Let me stress, this is something that was already approved in 2020, and now there is fear that he will try to do the same. Kick out many public workers in order to fill their positions with MAGA profiles. Basically, Trump wants total control of the government and the party. Of that, there is no doubt. The issue is that trying to achieve that objective may cause the president-elect to seek to purge anyone who does not want to bend the knee to him. We're not saying that it will happen, but there's concern that it will. And there are certainly more than enough reasons to think so. And here, I'd like to be clear. Whatever you may think of Donald Trump, you can agree more or less with his international policy or his economic policy, but this is perhaps the most disturbing terrain of all. Trump's way of making policy is effective, but it could also be dangerous. There are some red lines that should not be crossed, and I personally hope they aren't. But if we're making this warning, it isn't on a whim. It's because Trump has been threatening and verbally attacking everyone for months. It remains to be seen what ultimately happens with all these statements, whether they materialize into something or remain mere bravado in front of the microphone. If only that were the case. Be that as it may, another very controversial issue is the one that has to do with his intention to annul the judicial cases against him. The fact is that Trump has a lot of judicial fronts open, including 4 federal cases. 2 of them are particularly relevant. The first relates to the illegal retention of classified documents and obstruction of justice. I'm sure many of you remember this news item.
FBI executes search warrant at Trump's Mar-a-Lago in document investigation.
And then the other important case is related to his attempt to annul or intervene in the 2022 elections. Leading both cases is Special Prosecutor Jack Smith. Well, do you know what many analysts say could happen? Exactly, Mr. Smith could be fired by Trump at the drop of a hat. After all, who does the prosecutor's office depend on? The president. Let's not forget that in the United States, the Attorney General is the head of the Department of Justice, who is part of the federal government and is appointed by the president. So all indications are that that's where the shots will be fired. Another thing that generates a lot of concern among non-Trump supporters is something that has to do with judicial appointments. And in this case, I'm not referring not to the Supreme Court, but rather to federal judges. During his first term, Trump appointed 226 judges. So far, nothing unusual. The problem is that Trump tends to pick Trumpists to fill all available positions. VisualPolitik community, this is the most worrying aspect of the former president. It could be something like a world of shadows. The highlights, of course, would be the reduction of taxes and the elimination of bureaucracy, although it isn't clear what will happen to the deficit. Be that as it may, there will be plenty of time to talk. The issue now is that Donald Trump has won the election. And the question is, what do you think his new term will be like? Leave us your impressions in the comments, and let's start a debate. And of course, if you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe to VisualPolitik if you haven't already done so. Thank you so very much for being there. All the best. See you next time.